what I try to teach my kids is to understand why this is right and why this is wrong. It's not, you don't do this because then you will be punished, or I'm doing that because then I will get a prize. No,
Right.
don't. Why is it wrong and why is it right?
This is Dadography, a podcast with stories and insights on fatherhood from dads around the globe, dedicated to providing you with the tools and tips to become a better dad. All right, everyone, I'd like to welcome you once again to the Dadography podcast. I'm your host, Corey Ward, and today's guest is Jogeir Toppe, and I know I'm pronouncing that wrong, so Jogeir, you'll have to help me out here momentarily. Welcome to the show, man.
Well, thanks a lot, Corey. I think your pronunciation was perfect. I have, hundreds of different ones, and I'm used to hearing a lot of different versions, so yours is one of the better ones.
Oh,
that's
wow.
For sure.
Well, thank you. Well, tell us a little bit about yourself. Just give us a sense of who you are.
I'm born in Norway, so I'm Norwegian. But I grew up many of my childhood years in Latin America. And then moved back to Norway and studied there. And I worked. And then I went to Africa, worked there, and back to Norway. And then I ended up in Panama.
Yeah, you've definitely been around the world there a little bit, man, in terms of moving around, for sure.
Well, I lived 10 years in Ecuador, and actually my first year of life was in Costa Rica, so I'm almost back to where it all started. I was born in Norway, but 3 months old, my parents, they moved to Costa Rica to study Spanish, and then they moved to Ecuador. And then I stayed there for 10 years, and then back to Norway.
Okay. So tell me about your wife, your kids.
Yes, well, that's also a story. I left Norway. I went to Ghana. I stayed there for a couple of years. I worked there. And that's where I met my wife. She's not from Ghana, but I met my wife there. She's from Côte d'Ivoire, or Ivory Coast, which is a neighboring country in West Africa. So I met her there, and then after some years, I brought her to Norway. We actually married in Ivory Coast, and then in order to get, all the paperwork and permissions, to enter is not easy when you are in particular from African countries, to get a visa. And so we married there, and then we stayed in Norway for a few years, and then we went to Italy and worked there for almost 10 years, and then from Italy we moved to Panama. So I have three kids. So, or not I, but we, let's say. So 18 years and 15 and one that will be 10 in a couple of months' time.
What are their names?
The names, the first one is Johannes, and then a girl that is named Esther, and then the last comer, he is Daniel.
You mentioned that you were born in Norway, but the first portion of your life was in Costa Rica. I did not know that. What was your father like? What was your dad like?
I would say my father, he was a traditional Norwegian father of that time. And, at home, my mother was the one cooking and cleaning, and then my father was responsible for, the more traditional father things. I remember him as a strict father, somebody that you followed what he said, and that's it. But he was also a loving father, and I remember many fun things we did together. He liked to play with us and to be part of, it was not somebody that was just sitting there commanding you to do this or that. No, he was also very participative in what we did, and enjoy, playing and teasing and, all this, which I think we have learned a lot. I don't know if it's good or bad, but, we were a big family. I have 2 sisters and 3 brothers, and then me. So we were 6 kids. So we needed to have a kind of structure at home, in order to keep us on, on the correct path. So we had a very good life growing up in Ecuador. When I think about my 10 years, well, I was like 11 years when they left from there. It's just good memories. So when I go there, it's kind of, I'm back to where I grew up. I only have good memories from that time, both as a family and as a country.
You mentioned that your father was traditional in his fathering style, and on occasion he would be strict. I wonder, have you found later on in life that even though he was strict, that a lot of the life lessons he taught you as a kid were right or wrong?
Yes, I think, when I'm thinking of it now, I would say, well, he was strict when I was young, and then he relaxed more and more. So it kind of, you set the limits, and you know where the limits are, and then you learn to, how can I say, to judge yourself. This is good, this is the right thing to do, or this is not the right thing to do. And that's
Right.
something I think I also learned is, what I try to teach my kids is to understand why this is right and why this is wrong. It's not, you don't do this because then you will be punished, or I'm doing that because then I will get a prize. No,
Right.
don't. Why is it wrong and why is it right? Because then when I'm not around, they will still be able to do the right or the wrong. It's not, they don't need anybody to tell them. So that's something I think I've learned, the importance of explaining why and understanding why this is good or this is bad, why I should do it, because then I will be able to judge myself if I come into a situation which I've never been into, but I can then know what is the right thing to do. So I think that's something I'm trying to teach my kids. It's, well, it's not only about, telling you what is right and what is wrong. It's about understanding why it is right and why it's wrong. I think that's something very important.
Yeah, I agree with you. You mentioned how, there were different roles. So let me ask you this as it relates to roles. How important do you think fatherhood actually is, in your own words?
I think it's extremely important for the kids to be able to have a mother and father. We are different, although we can do things at home, but I think it's very important for the kids to have a mother and a father, two people that are responsible in teaching you. In particular, for the boys to have a father who they can use as kind of as an example of how they think they should behave and be. And I think that the role of being an example, that's maybe the most important, father and mother. You have two role figures that you can follow, and you will identify yourself. If you're a boy, you will identify yourself, I think, more with the father. Mm-hmm. And that's why it's so important to have a father as well as a mother, because you need somebody to look at in order to, how can I say, when you shape yourself, the kids, they look more at what you do than what you say at the end. Because if you say something and you do something that's, but you said you have to do it this way, and now you're doing the opposite way, which shows the importance of having a father as a role figure, to look at, not only to listen or to read what is right and wrong, but to really see how it works out in practice.
So clearly, fatherhood for you is important. You've mentioned earlier that you're from Norway and your wife is from not Ghana. What?
Ivory Coast.
Yeah. Ivory Coast,
yes,
correct.
Neighboring country.
So, what is it like when we think about fathering in such a culturally diverse home? In some instances, I would imagine there's different perspectives even on parenting, because the cultures are so vastly different. Is that the case?
On one side, it's very true. On the other side, I will say my experience now, well, growing up in many different countries and married to somebody that is from a very different continent and very different, how can I say, culture. Mm-hmm. But when you really get to know people, you really get to know a culture, what you realize is that actually we are not that different. When you really get to know people, you realize actually at the end we are very much interested in the same things. We want our kids to become good and respectful individuals, but maybe the way we want to make our kids become this very reflective and responsible individual is a little bit different. So of course there are challenges in my culture. How can I say the women have much more power in the house than maybe in an African culture, where maybe the man will be more powerful on one side. But even in Africa, the women are very powerful, and in particular at home. So we have I've never ever really thought about that this is a really big challenge. I think we all want our kids to be, okay, say not perfect, but as good. And you feel maybe the kids, they reflect the parents. Or when you're out, they will look at the kids and they say, if they are well behaved, they will say, oh, these have very good parents. If they're not well behaved, you will think the parents are not doing a good job. But it's not that simple, So I think that in a Northern European culture is more accepted usually, that the kids, okay, you're not all perfect, but in an African culture, I think that's much more strong. That as a kid, you are actually a mirror of the parent. So it's very, very important how you behave, which I also agree, it's very important. And I think in our case, we complement each other very much. What we really want to achieve is the same, but two different ways. And I think they learn, and then pick from us what they think is right and what is wrong. At the end, that's what we want them to understand.
How do you maintain a good balance between the cultures and not, lift up one and minimize the other for the kids? Like, how do you help them to understand that, their Norwegian heritage and their Ivory Coast heritage?
On one side, at home, our common language at home is mainly Norwegian. So even my wife speaks Norwegian with the kids, but she also speaks French sometimes. When it's something very serious, she will speak French to them. So I always teach them, say, okay, if it's French, we know it's serious. We never ever focus that much to say, okay, now we have to do 50% Norway, 50% Cote d'Ivoire.
Right.
We somehow accepted that we are different, parents from different background, and the kids, they know it, and never ever thought that much about it, that that's a problem. It's just that's how parents are different. Even in if you're from the same country, parents would be very different. In our case, I never saw it as a big challenge, but maybe that's part of reflecting also the background. I grew up, in many countries, under different cultures. We never looked at ourselves as 100% Norwegians. We are influenced by Latin American culture, and in my case also African culture. And you see the advantages, from both of these cultures. In more westernized cultures, maybe it's very much more materialistic. You need to have, a good income. You need to have good jobs, and what makes you happy, having safety. But if you look at in African cultures, the focus there is to, be happy. Maybe you don't have food for tomorrow, but you're happy today. Be happy with what you have today, and try to live life today instead of thinking of, I have to plan for my retirement. And also the responsibilities within the family. Like in our culture, okay, I'm responsible for my kids, and that's it. If you go to Africa, the social structure is, if you grow up in a village, the whole village is responsible for all the kids. So you let the kids run out. It's not only I'm the father and I'm the mother. We are the responsible. If you do something that you're not supposed to do, well, it's not my responsibility. Yes, in the village, you will all be responsible, because maybe today your father or mother is not around, and then but somebody else will be there and correct you if there is something wrong. So that's something also, I think it's good that in our culture, when the kids grow up, you're 18 years old, you are out of the house. It's your responsibility. Right. But in more African way culture, I think we're still one family, and we're still, we don't. It's not like we disconnect. So it's much more close. As a kid, you are much more responsible also for your parents when when they get old, take care of them. And in my culture, well, Northern European, is more like, okay, if the kids can't take care of you, you will go to a home for elderly, and then you will go and visit them when you have time, but the real responsibilities, economic responsibility, is not yours.
Your kids are really third culture kids. You being from Norway, your wife being from Ivory Coast, and then you guys living for a number of years. You mentioned in Italy and now in Panama. Do you think in the long term that the moving and what they've experienced or been exposed to as kids culturally is going to prove to be a benefit to them later on in life?
Well, there's no doubt that we have many benefits from knowing different cultures, knowing different countries, knowing several languages in a world that is more and more globalized. That's one. There is no doubt that will be something that they can really benefit from. But at the same time, moving around like from country to country is also, you get friends, and then after a while you move again, and then you leave your friends and you have to start from scratch again, which is also, it's not always easy. Some kids or even adults like us, some easily make new friends, some need time, to get friends, and then when you finally have some good friends, you have to leave them. So what I think, moving around makes you very flexible, and you get to know a lot of things, but at the same time you become somebody that you really don't want maybe to get too close, to have too close friends, because you know that in a few years you will move again, and then it's too hard to leave them. So that's maybe one side, that it's more negative. But at the same time you are able to get into new environments easily, so you don't need time to adapt that much. You adapt very quickly to where you are, but maybe you don't go into very, very deep relationships, because I think you are aware that I'm here only for a few years and then I'm going again. But I think the knowledge as kids in particular, to understand the world, not thinking that when you're growing up in the same village or the same town, wherever you are, you think that that's the whole world is like that.
Hey fellas, just so you're aware, you can stay up to breast and up to speed on every episode by following us on YouTube. In the search bar, just type the Dadography podcast. When it comes up, select the subscribe button. You'll be sure to be up to date on all of the tools and tips that we get from fathers around the globe. I know you guys lived in Italy for a number of years, and then now living in Panama. So that's the Italian, Spanish, and then obviously we're speaking in English, Norwegian. How many languages do your kids speak?
Well, that's a good question. I think you mentioned them, most of them. Norwegian, which is, how can I say, the father tongue, let's say, and French, which is not her mother tongue, but it's the official language in the country. And then she has her own tribal language, which is her mother tongue. So she speaks, I don't know how many different languages. But the kids speak Norwegian, French, Italian, and then now the last 3-4 years they have learned Spanish. English, of course, because English is their first language, because since first started at school, it has been English.
Times have really changed. Before, I don't think people were quite the globetrotter that we see people now. It's very common for families to move from one country to another. What encouragement would you give to dads thinking about moving abroad from wherever they may be?
In the world we are living, so global, I think, how can I say, if you get the opportunity, or even if it's only for a year or a couple of years, it gives the kids and parents as well something that will change your life. You really understand much more of the world and what's going on. And I'm sure it will also impact the kids, what they would like to study, on what they would like to spend their life, and also where in the world. They are very flexible. It's not like, oh, I'm going to study in the US, I'm going to study in Europe. It's like, well, I don't care. It's not something big, like scary for them.
Right.
Maybe the first time you move is a little bit scary, but then you realize, actually, this was a very nice experience. And people are. What surprises you maybe most is that how nice people are in most places you move.
Mm-hmm.
And when you get to know the local people, then you realize how nice people are. So when you get to know people, you really look at the country in a different way. And I think that's something from my parents. We grew up in Ecuador, where the house was open for anybody. So we had people from Ecuadorians, indigenous people, or local people that came into our home every day. So we really got to know, locals, and invited everywhere, even to sleep over far away. We had to walk for hours and sleep in no electricity and no running water. It was so nice experience to get to know the people and how really people live, and that's what really I remember from my years in Ecuador. The friends and the contacts we have there, these are local people, which is really nice experience, because then you really get to understand maybe the culture and the country in a very different way, not only going to resorts and, nice beaches, but really get to know the culture and the food and
truly melting into the culture.
Yes, that's what makes it really interesting when you visit a country.
So your encouragement to dads would be to embrace the local culture and to really try to allow the kids to glean from the cultural experience as much as possible.
If that's possible, yes. That's where they really will have an experience where they can bring with them when they move from that country.
Now, we've touched on the cultural aspect of fathering, but I'm curious about challenges that you faced as it relates to race, because you obviously Norway, you're white, and your wife being from Ivory Coast, she's black. And so your children, of course, are mixed race. What are some of the challenges, or have you even witnessed or seen any discrimination in your travels and moves?
Well, unfortunately, that's a reality. That's how it is. That when in many countries, if you are of a different culture and you can see it by your skin color, it can sometimes you can experience bad things, and in some cases also positive things, because you have both. In Norway, which is now more and more, how can I say, even since it's like 15 years ago we moved away from Norway, and it was in the second biggest city where we were living. There were not that many Africans at that time. In the capital, much more. But now these things have also changed. But although not that many, but there were situations where, in particular, I, as a white, how can I say, Norwegian, I felt it more than my wife. Because I never, how can I say, for example, in some shops, we went together, electronics, to buy a computer or a TV or something. And when we went in there, almost every time I said, why are these people following us everywhere? The guards. And I said, we went to look for something there. He was just behind there. And then I went somewhere else, and he popped up there as well. At the end, I had to leave the shop. I said, I can't stand it. My wife said, but this is normal. I said, no, this is not normal. I saw it because I said, no, this is not how, I have never experienced this kind of thing before. And she thought it's normal because this is how they are everywhere. But in general, people are very positive and very helpful. But it's still, if you are an immigrant, it's more difficult to get a job. It's more,
of course,
that's a reality.
What do you teach your kids, Jogeir, about race, being that they're of mixed race, and what are some of those lessons like?
Well, we're telling them the stories where we have experienced, although there are not that many, but there are. So they are aware of, this is unfortunately the reality in the world today. My kids, they have gone on international schools since they started school. So even if they were in Italy and now here in Panama, it's international school. So in a very multicultural setting. So they never experienced bad things because it's so multicultural, that's the natural thing for them. And being in Panama, I would say, okay, in Norway, I explained, in Italy, it's the same thing. I would say most people are very nice, but you you experience in some cases that you are discriminated. Moving to Panama, I think it was a little bit different because here my family is like just an average family. The kids, they don't look at them as anything different from anybody else. So it's so here they will look at them as locals. Right. So then you will feel much less. Although even here you can feel discriminated. That's reality everywhere.
What has it been like for you with COVID, man? I know you guys traveled a lot, and you mentioned your kids were or are international schoolers. What does that change look like for you guys with COVID?
Staying at home, has also given us a good opportunity to spend much more time together. So breakfast together, we can have lunch together, and dinner. So we had much more time to talk and spend time together. And I think that underlines maybe the most important thing of being a father or even a mother is spending time with your kids. It's not necessarily all the things you do and all the organizing trips here and there. No, it's the important thing is to spend time together with the kids and the family. I think that one we really see that as family we have come much closer, by spending so much time actually together. Although it can bring some, conflicts and all, but in total, I would say it has been, as a family, the kids they have come closer to each other and as parents. So I feel that one is something that if you're going to look at something positive, I think that's something that this year has given us the opportunity to spend so much time, 24 hours a day together.
Are there any things that you learned about either any of your kids as a result of just being home more?
Well, yeah. Well, my daughter, she's starting doing some art and playing music, piano. We have a couple of them, so they never use them, And suddenly they're starting fighting for what it wants to be on. So that was something that they started, going on YouTube and learning to play different songs. And so new skills, they were forced to do other things that they were used to do and to find alternatives. And now I think maybe some of these activities, they will continue doing them because they enjoyed it.
Excellent. Well, Jogeir, I want to thank you for coming on to the Dadography podcast and sharing with us what it's like fathering third culture kids, traveling with your kids. And I really appreciate you coming on to the show and just giving us those insights today, man.
Wow. Talk about being around the world. Jogeir recommends that you teach your children to understand the fundamental differences between wrong and right instead of the more traditional teachings based on rewards and consequences. This will help them when they are faced with new challenges and for whatever reasons you are not around to provide guidance. He mentioned the many benefits that come along with being a third culture kid, knowing different countries, different cultures, and different languages. However, be aware of how difficult it could be for them to develop long-lasting friendships if you're moving from country to country. For a better and lasting experience, make sure your kids come in contact with the local culture and people, not just the made-for-tourist attractions. Once again, thank you for listening and stay tuned for next week's episode. We are nearing our final lap for season 2 and it's going to be great. See you all next week.